So, welcome back to 3rd Age Reforged and to the grand final of the ongoing tournament that has been played across a few variations on the test build of the now, increasingly imminent new patch for 3rd Age Reforged as a whole. And it's been kind of nice to do this, honestly. I think that the format of the tournament has made it difficult in the early rounds to cover absolutely everything, but it does mean that the tournament was pretty competitive and also pretty long as well. It's been going on over the course of several weeks, which does give it a bit of added flavour as well. And yes, we have the two most impressive pairings out of all of them that contested the tournament, and we shall now see Tommy and TiesNijhof, who go into this as favourites really, considering the fact they went into the knockout stages as the number one ranked team and did manage to get through their matchups. And then perhaps a slightly more surprise package in a few ways in TundrasFox and Wafflez, who managed to overcome the other team that managed to win pretty much all of their initial games as well. And they now get to contest the grand final. This was actually a best of 5, but this is the deciding game on the dry lake bed as well, so one of the more open maps, a little bit of terrain here and there, but for the most part this is going to be an open affair, and we shall see who comes out on top. It's going to be a couple of evil men factions for the red team today, and then the blue team is going to be the unlikely mix of elves and orcs, but it does give them maybe a wider net in terms of strengths, whereas the red team put on a little bit more of a united front, and very, very numerous, of course, as you can see across the way there. I was going to initially release this on a Wednesday actually, but I have decided sort of ahead of time, before I actually go ahead and record it, that I am going to delay it a little bit and put it on the weekend. This is the grand final after all. It deserves a spot where the most amount of people are going to have the freest amount of time to be able to take it in. Like I said, I hope we get to see a little bit more of this when it's made public, essentially, the build. This is the sort of thing which I wouldn't mind doing again, maybe in a slightly more streamlined format, try and sort of cover everything that time around and maybe make it a little bit better tracked. This was a little bit more ad hoc, especially considering the way that it was run, trying to sort of gain people and sort of get people on their free time basically is always going to be difficult, even with the rules put in place. But enough rambling, we shall go through the army compositions, and we shall start with the blue team, and we're going to start with Mordor here, played by Tommy. Obviously a numerous force, but interspersed with a good amount of quality, and even on the open field some of their monstrous units can be a real handful. It means that if Mordor get the momentum in this sort of fight, they are going to be pretty difficult to stop. Temple Guard, armor-piercing arrows, of course, if they can target down individual high-priority enemies, they could certainly be worth their weight in gold, especially considering the fact that even if they do get engaged in melee, they are a fantastic melee combatant as well. They're going to be joined on the front line by some other skirmishers, Uruk archers. I mean, archers as a general rule in this tournament haven't been the be-all and end-all. In many ways, they've been a sort of side dish to some early game manoeuvring, and then it's been other units, mainly cavalry in particular, as you would expect on more open maps like this, has been very effective. But archers here are going to be trying to force the enemy's hand and get them to move around a little bit more so at long range. We've got some orc fodder as well, just padding out the numbers of Mordor, which of course they can do relatively easily. If you do invest more in Mordor's quality, they don't go completely without numbers as a result of units like this, but of course they're not going to be up to much in melee. They really are just there to make you look a little bit scarier and support some of your smaller units by being meat shields. Arnheim shadow bows as well, so another unit of archers, albeit rangers, do have the damage values to be able to do damage quickly to the right kinds of units. So we'll see if the Ardenheim get the opportunity to do that. Uruk infantry in and amongst more orc fodder. Not too surprising to see the tour de force that is the Olag High as well. Olag High here going to be right in the middle of the lines. The damage that they're capable of chucking out in a small space of time is significant. Though, between the Haradrim and the Umbar forces over there, they do have some good high damage infantry, which can be one of the main problems that trolls still do suffer from, albeit they are still going to be a scary, scary force. We do have the Melkor's Abominations in here, of course, an anti-cavalry cavalry unit, as much of the really high-end orcish cavalry tends to be more of a defensive unit perhaps than anything else, but that will be useful considering the prevalence of lancers so far in this tournament. We also have the Temple Executioners here, very strong unit of two-handed sword infantry. Orc javelins, I mean, they may not be as universally efficient as they are in a siege, because cavalry is more prevalent in this sort of setting, as we've already said, and that is the main weakness to something like this. But they are still so cheap, and ultimately the javelins, if they can get into a good position, will be just the sort of thing to really help deal with some of the heavy hitters, especially from Umbar across the way for a relatively cheap cost. Troll drummers will help keep, mostly it's going to be the Orc fodder and Uruk infantry that they help keep pointed in the right direction, because it is a relatively low quality front line in terms of the sheer numbers. It looks intimidating from afar, but when you examine it, it's in individual points of the line that Mordor are actually scary here, whereas the full length of it, there are going to be quality gaps there. More Orc fodder and Orc javelins, and then over here another javelin wielding unit, but of course the Beasts of Gorgoroth are more here for their ability to act as living battering rams, elephant class units. Far more fragile than the Mumakil. They still suffer a little bit, where if they stop moving at all or get focused down at all, they will start to drop. But there are enough of them that isn't too much of a problem, and the sheer number of them means if you can get them rolling through the lines, they can be a real handful to have to deal with for the enemy, although Harad and Umbar both have their answers there. Moving on, we have TiesNijhof playing as Lothlorien. Ballistas have been, or Ballistae have been, a real fixture of this tournament, really, and I think that's because if you're going to be playing in a tournament like this, more of a competitive setting, you really want to try and get the most out of your army. You want to make your enemy move around in ways they wouldn't. The ballista is probably the most cost-effective way of doing that in the game, because it is still the cheapest artillery piece. It's not going to be devastating, but if you just sit there and take the damage that it dishes out, you're going to put yourself in a bit of a hole that you may not be able to get out of. We have seen instances, though, of artillery not necessarily being the be-all and end-all in this tournament. One of the semi-finals was a real example of that, when Dale brought their own equivalent of the ballista and weren't able to use it at all. We'll see if that's the case here. The red team have deployed further back. Looks like they've got their own artillery as well, so the early game is going to be about manoeuvring and trying to gain dominance in that regard, I think. Both sides will be really hoping that they can do so. Lorien spearmen, cheaper by Elven standards. Spears, of course, also going to be useful for that anti-cavalry on the open field, but lightweight, as any entry-level Elven unit is going to be. Kindred of Celeborn, the throwing axes, throwing projectiles in general, are going to be devastating. Kindred as well, though. They're going to be able to do a lot of damage from afar, but also up close, much like the Temple Guard we mentioned previously. Even if you do manage to silence them early, which is certainly a distinct possibility in a field battle, they're still very, very potent in melee. The same goes for the Galadhrim nobles with their Silverthorn arrows. Lothlorien, despite being on the losing side in one of the semi-finals, we saw them make a real good fist of it with all of their archers, and then how good they were in melee. They will be hoping that something like the Galadhrim nobles will be able to do that again. Lorien archers maybe less so, but still good damage from afar. I mean, they're certainly banking a little bit more so on range superiority, investing more in archers than we've seen thus far. I don't know if the blue team would have it in them to be aggressive if it came down to it. Maybe if Lothlorien reveal a few more units that we can't see yet. Galadhrim riders and Lothlorien cavalry as well. The lancers, standard lancers, which have been so effective so far, and the Galadhrim riders, of course, for that quality and even more Silverthorn arrows to knock their opponents off balance, which they will be hoping to do, as we start off with Wafflez and his Umbar force. We've got some Corsairs on the front line, very much the same sort of thing as the Orc fodder from across the way. You've got the quality that Umbar can bring, but you want to pad that out with numbers. It's a little bit easier to do when you've got a throwaway unit like this. They are actually a bit more effective than the Orc fodder in melee as well, but they do lack the subtle anti-cavalry bonuses that the Orc fodder do have, so swings and roundabouts in that regard. Balagaya pikemen, I mean, that's one thing certainly that we didn't see a huge amount of from the blue team, if anything in fact. Phalanx units, so if it comes down to a grind on the front line for victory, the Balagaya pikemen and possibly as well, yes, the Nara and Aru sentinels here in the middle with their shields will be certainly something that Umbar will be hoping to bring to bear, and the Nara and Aru are not even the easiest unit to kill with arrows, even though that is something the blue team have in abundance. Harbingers of Castamere strong, of course. The quality centre of Umbar and their units does mean that they can pose a problem still, even for forces like Lothlorien, especially when you can surround them with appropriate numbers. Alcarondas Legion, another solid unit as well, which are going to be decent at shrugging off those projectiles from across the way. More Corsairs as well, so everyone's certainly making use of their fodder class units where they are available. Some Corsair Blackguards for those javelins, a little bit more of a well-rounded unit than the Orc fodder. In a siege battle, the Orc fodder would, you know, for the most part, be more efficient than a unit like this, but here on the open field, where being engaged in melee is much more of a possibility, the well-rounded nature of the Blackguards can pay dividends. A couple of them, and then both units of high-tier cavalry. To be fair, Umbar don't have the most variety when it comes to their cavalry. Even their standard lancers are pretty expensive, so you may as well, well, in this case, Wafflez has decided that he may as well go for the extra and go for the quality. It does mean that with both of these units in tandem, we have seen that be effective before. We shall see if it shall be again. And we can see the Trebuchet of Numenor here as well. Much more damage potential than the Ballista, but a little bit more wild as well. Easier to hit, but the crew itself also, with those hammers, a danger. Red team though, artillery dominance perhaps, with the Haradrim also bringing a Ballista. We'll see how effective all of those archers from the blue team can be if they lose the artillery fight. It may force the blue team into being aggressive, and like I said, I don't know if they have the composition for that necessarily. The quality of Mordor's lower end units will certainly be tested, but then again, Harad don't exactly have the best in that regard either, so maybe that will work out. A couple of units of Haradrim Spearmen at the front, marginally better than the Orc fodder you would suggest, but to the extent that it's not a huge difference between the two. Again though, the Phalanx units, the Southron Pikemen may not be the highest tier of pike, but the fact that the opposition don't really have any of these kinds of units means that if they can get set, it will be a difficult thing to batter down from the front. Trollmen of Harad in behind, I mean this is the sort of unit which can cause a real problem even to Mordor's higher tier units really, with the damage that they're capable of kicking out. They've always been one of Harad's leading lights, and they continue to be so. Muhad Beast Hunters, more javelins as well, so everyone is going to have access to throwing projectiles here. Manoeuvring going to be key, and if you can use these guys, a few volleys of them can certainly help tilt the battle in your favour. The Serpent Guard may not be as tanky as the cavalry that Umbar have brought, their allies, but they are swift, they are dangerous off the charge still, and that will be what they're hoping to do if they can force the blue team into a forward advance. We've got the Champions of Nefrad a little bit further back, but again a very high quality unit, probably in terms of sheer damage, outside of maybe some of the Lothlorien units, they could be capable of chucking out the most. We shall see. Javelin cavalry as well from the Muhad Beastmasters, so the cavalry interplay is going to be very intriguing here, especially when you consider that there is a unit of horse archers over here as well, the Serpent Camel Archers, the Mumakil over there, staring at the cliff, but the monstrous units from Harad are here in force as well. Both sides going for some high tier units, some specialty units. Let's see what they can do with them. Neither side really going full in for a really high quality centre infantry. You can see Harad with their monstrous units, more cavalry as well. Artillery doesn't come cheap, which is why again Lothlorien bringing theirs, and then Harad and Umbar also. Interesting to see the Trebuchet going after Mordor first and foremost. I mean, they do score a couple of hits, but it's only on Orc fodder. It might mean that they were going after the Melkor's Abominations. I mean, it's better than hitting nothing, but not a huge amount of value there. I think both sides will be hoping that they can sit in formation comfortably, at least for the opening salvos. The artillery duel, I mean, if the blue team can win the artillery duel as the rain starts to fall in the deep desert, not the sort of thing which, I mean, Umbar and Harad are basically fighting on home turf here. But yeah, a win for the blue team artillery would be a massive boon for them, because it allows them then to move their archers forward, really put some pressure on. It's not the shortest pitch battle either, nearly 20k frames is fairly long as far as one of these goes. I'm a little bit surprised that, yeah, it would behoove them, I think, to try and snipe out that artillery while they can. The Trebuchet is then freer to target what it will and get that damage done. I mean, the crew of the Trebuchet of Numenor is also, I think, by a significant margin the most effective, and again, one of the Haradrim ballistas already burning. I'm a little bit surprised they moved the ballista that far forward before deciding to shoot. But c'est la vie. And there was an earlier battle in the group stages that started off, actually one of the semi-finals as well, that started off pretty similar to this. In fact, I think it was the one that Wafflez and TundrasFox won, I believe. So they won't be any strangers to this, although on that occasion the artillery duel was a bit of a dead rubber, really. Although on this occasion, good fortune certainly favours the blue team by the looks of things, because they have only one ballista left and they haven't really landed a hit at all on the elven ones. And this is a problem, because it does mean that they're going to have to rethink if it goes this way. The problem that they then have, if they sit back, try and absorb all of the archer damage and, well, the remains of all the ballista bolts as well, they will be sufficiently softened up then for the blue team to finish them off with all of their melee might. Will it come to that, I wonder? Trebuchet going overhead. I mean, they are continuing to take hits here. That was fortunate that that one didn't hit as well. And this is why maybe the flaming shot is the way, because you do still stand a pretty good chance of making quick work of opposition artillery pieces. I mean, if they hit at all, 38%. I mean, they have at least scored some hits, but the problem is the DPS is now so much lower on that ballista now that it has to reload, and they can only fire one at a time, whereas the elves have three. Taking a look over on the flank over there, the Moonhide Beastmasters just ambling their way forwards. The problem is, with the amount of foot archers that the blue team have, it's going to be difficult for them to move in and harass effectively, especially with javelin cavalry, with how close they're going to need to get. And now the other ballista burning. So that is a good start for the blue team, not the sort of start that the Reds would have been hoping for. Though something that the red team will take heart in is the fact that the blue team need this sort of fight to go their way, based on the kind of units that they have brought. So far though, I mean, the artillery, it definitely needs to get more kills than just a handful of orc fodder, you would suggest. The elves, what will they target now? Could they go after the centre of the Umbar army, perhaps? Try and do things that way. Heard the throwing or the throwing animation there, or Harad ballista crew. I mean, moving forwards, I mean, you don't want to throw any units away unnecessarily. Even these guys who are just an understrength unit of Southron spearmen, everything is going to be key. I mean, you can see here that if the ballista can kill off the Trebuchet of Numenor as well, that will surely then be the green light for them to slowly push those archers forward. And that's where having this core of pikes, mostly unshielded, there it goes. I mean, they've slapwalked their way into this situation a little bit, the red team. Pushing the ballista forward early on. I mean, Medieval 2, once you've committed to a line with artillery, it can be a little bit difficult to correct, but what will they do from here? Fodder still loitering. Can use their artillery pretty much freely. Was that enough to kill off? Yes, it was. Trebuchet burns. And that is pretty much a flawless artillery victory for the blue team, having less than half the cost, considering the cost of a trebuchet. Again, from a red team perspective, it's not the end of the world, but how do you now approach the blue team? The way that you could counteract their archer-heavy nature would have been to bombard them with artillery more freely. Maybe that is still the way. As much as it does chew into your ammunition supply a little bit more, maybe doubling up on the elven ballista would have been the way forward there, and then the archers could have focused a little bit more on them, soften them up and move forward with the infantry, but they won't be able to do that now. And they are starting to slowly move forward with the archers. I mean, they won't shoot down the Haradrim ballista crew as such. And the elves, when they're at long range and they can dictate the pace of the battle in that regard, it is a real problem for them. They don't have any foot archers either to really... Oh no, they do have some Rangers of Castamere that have revealed themselves, and that's decently damaging, but Rangers are not really built to be engaged in a skirmish fight. They're reasonably expensive as well, from a cost efficiency standpoint. Will it be enough? Uruk archers running out a little bit further in front. They need to be a little bit careful they don't get too far ahead of their main army, otherwise all of that red team cavalry could yet pose a very real problem. And this being the grand final, no one's going to throw things into the meat grinder without thinking about it first, you would imagine. Haradrim ballista crew, and then the regular Haradrim spearmen moving forward as well as a screen. I mean, not the kind. I mean, to be fair, considering the amount of ammunition these archers have, and considering how frenetic these pitch battles can become, there is a case for saying that even these kinds of units, maybe something as basic as the Uruk archers, should be shooting at them. Just let them know that the pressure is on. Manpower is dwindling, and the longer that you leave it, the more danger that you're in. Certainly stuff like the Temple Guard and the Elven Archers can be spared that, but fodder moving forward, acting as the screen as well. Thinly spread lines in loose formation, but covering an awful lot of the battlefield. Glathrin riders on one side. Still the small matter of these Muhard Beastmasters. If they had a little bit more range to them, it might be a little bit more of a concern, but as it is, as much as they are something to take into account for the blue team, it's not the sort of thing that they will be changing their entire plan for. Kill as well. This has got the makings of another one of those where the manoeuvring phase is very, very lengthy, and then everything descends into chaos pretty quickly, but controlled chaos will be the goal for both of these teams now. And again, having an artillery heavy combination of forces from both sides to a certain extent, but certainly the red team does inform this sort of approach, and now Elven Ballista, having already been a very key part of this battle already. Starting to see the Haradrim move forward on the flank, but it's going to be the Elven Ballista that is going to start firing. I mean, from a red team perspective, if they can move forward quickly enough to silence the archers en masse, having that many skirmishers, particularly the Orcish ones who aren't particularly good in melee, could be the key. And I mean, as soon as they do get into range of the archers, the red team will need to move fast, because certainly the unshielded phalanx units are going to be the first port of call for all of the red team's skirmishers. Our Beastmasters down that way. Ballista bolts continuing to fly across the battlefield. Harad as they move ever further forwards. I'm a little bit surprised actually that a target for the archers has not yet presented itself. Hunters, Trollmen, Champions of Nefra, very clearly defined banks of units from the red team, so they are now moving forward. Rangers of Castamere in and amongst the Corsairs to try and mitigate any damage, but the Ballista, I mean, Harbingers of Castamere and Naryn Aru Sentinels at the centre of this Umbar force, so now that they're in range, the clock is ticking basically. If they get much further forward, they will of course be in range of other scary units as well, but so you have to question how much ammunition the Ballista has left. Could be key. 100 spearmen, a few dismounted Serpent Guard, a decent little force moving around here in Mordor. Thinly spread as they were, are now moving backwards a little bit also. Temple Guard though, firing away. At what will be the question. Serpent Archers revealing themselves as well, so more of a skirmishing presence than initially thought, but 1-to-1 against the Temple Guard, there's only going to be one victor there. At the back, still those Beastmasters way in behind the lines. And this is interesting, for the most part the aggressor, the ones that move forward, take the front foot and start to control more of the battlefield, have tended to go on to win that, and the red team, they may have been forced into doing it, but they are doing so here. The blue team need to play whack-a-mole to an extent with the cavalry and the mobility. Just idling once again. guard. And the more of those armor-piercing arrows they can get down range into even decent units is a good sign. And any that hit Harad and Spearmen will likely result in a kill. Not the most value, but in a pitch battle, like I said, there's no guarantee you'll be able to use up all your ammunition anyway, so using it on something is better than using it on nothing. Certainly they've got the most out of that artillery. Meanwhile, monstrous units, the Beasts of Gorgoroth moving around that way. You can see in the backfield they're mirroring what the Mumakil are doing. That would be a rather peculiar fight to witness. I don't really know, like elephant class units attacking one another. A very strange thing indeed. I mean, the red team, I did say when the red team get into position the clock was ticking. It's not a fast moving clock, but it is still going. Like the damage that Ardenheim shadow bows can do over a relatively short period of time is not to be taken lightly. Lothlorien Riders now moving across. I mean, this is the kind of unit that can be a real problem for Muhard Beastmasters. The Beastmasters, if they get into range, could be a problem. But the Silverthorn arrows, Harad are not the most durable faction when it comes to dealing with projectiles of this type. Silverthorn arrows doing the business. Now here in the centre, Uruk archers still. So the red team have done the initial bit of moving forward and being aggressive, taking the front foot, and there are risks to going further, but I think it's an even bigger risk to stay static as they have. Grondas Faithful moving forward, Lorien archers moving backwards, Beasts of Gorgoroth still over here. I mean, unfortunately for a unit that was biding its time and waiting for this long, they've been bullied into submission really by the Lothlorien Riders, using what terrain there is on this settlement. Serpent Camel archers moving forward now, but maybe a little bit lagging to what they needed to be. Poison projectiles, I mean that's not likely to have the morale shattering effect on such a high tier elven unit, but at least it makes it easier for me to see where the arrows are. Meanwhile, the Ardenheim Shadowbows, and still they are content to wait, skirmishing back and forth as they are. I mean, this is what the Serpent Archers do for Harad. It's really their only higher end option when it comes to this sort of warfare. So none of the infantry has yet taken too much of a beating. Ballista still waits as well. It's very hard to catch someone unawares on a battlefield like this, especially in a 2v2. Both players can cover an awful lot of the field. Manoeuvring is the key. And well, these Silverthorns, I mean, bit by bit, this is value which is building in the blue team's favour. Considering the early artillery victory they had, it's not the sort of thing the red team can sustain. Like I said, they do have certain advantages when it comes to getting into close melee, and I think the time is approaching where you need to try and make something happen in that regard. Otherwise, it's not going to end that well for you. Just being wheeled back. Umbar seem pretty flat-footed as well. I mean, it's Harad that have moved further forwards. Ballista crew getting in the way of anything further. Serpent Camel archers now moving backwards. It's still, though, the Lothlorien Riders managing to engage in melee against some of the camels. Camels, of course, do have that anti-cavalry edge to them, but in terms of sheer quality, this elven unit, those Lothlorien Riders picking and prodding still. And now, surely this means that some sort of response is in order. Rangers of Castamere starting to return the favour a little bit, and to be fair, that sort of damage against the elven units could be exactly what the Doctor ordered from a red team perspective, because they do need to start landing hits on the enemy. Looks as though so far it's just just Lothlorien spearmen, but Lothlorien archers are going to be responding on the flank as well. And this is the kind of battle that I think the blue team wanted. Lothlorien Riders now returning to the fold, their work done. Good value secured on the flank. Not that much longer left in this one. Uruk archers now also in place. Still have that centre to their army, but it's not the most intimidating centre is the thing. Maybe the red team are concerned that they will simply scatter to the four winds. They don't want to be drawn in and then caught flat-footed, but at the moment, spearmen on the flank as well. As I said, there's not a huge amount left in this battle, so I'm a little bit surprised that we're not seeing a bit more movement at this point. Stuff like the Mumakil takes some killing, the Beasts of Gorgoroth, there are enough of them that you need to mulch through them fairly fast. Temple Guard, a bit more long range presence now over here. Rangers of Castamere have been in their thing, with the Uruk archers now working in response to them. I feel like the red team aren't sure how to approach this. I think they know that they need to be the ones to move forward at this point, because if they simply do nothing, the chip damage that they're going to take at the hands of all of the bowmen that the blue team have is going to be too much, and then they won't have the muscle to be able to deal with what the blues have. But they do need to do that in the right way, but time is drifting on by. Silverthorn arrow, you can see that there's more dead bodies over on this side of the field, and that's not surprising given the ranged focus. I think the red team now are going to try and crunch in from both sides on the blue team. And that does make the battlefield smaller for the blue team. I mean, it will make it more difficult for them to escape into the open field with some of their heavy hitters. The Beasts of Gorgoroth on their way across, I think in response to the Mumakil making their way back across over here as well. And now, I think we are going to see the red team make a play of it. It's not too late either, it's not terminal damage they've taken, but it has been a little bit longer in the making than I think would have been ideal, considering the extra bits of damage that these archers have been able to do. But we'll see. Still a lot of heavy lifting for Mordor's high tier skirmishers and Lothlorien's high tier skirmishers to be able to do. Now, in many ways, the battle begins here. Short and sharp, dismounted Serpent Guard. I mean, stuff like the Orc Fodder is really going to struggle against this sort of unit. Orc Fodder way on the flank. The Olag High will need to be the damage dealing heart of this army. Harad Ballista Crew, the Mumakil lumbering their way forwards. Beasts of Gorgoroth acting more as a backstop here, a supporting unit. The Olag High coming in from the flank. There's not a huge amount of high damage units over on the flank for Harad. I think all of the Trollmen are going to be punching up through the middle. I mean, that does mean that the regular Mordor forces are going to have to try and hold them at bay, and the Orc Fodder not doing a particularly good job of that, so better late than never here. The red team showcasing some of the strengths in their army. Some of the slightly depleted Lothlorien spearmen would be cast aside by the Alcarondas if not for the fact that some stronger Galathrun units are nearby as well. And I think actually we will go down to half speed, if only for a little bit. The Galathrun riders who are effective on the other side now delaying the full surround that Umbar are trying to do, and this is where this high tier Umbar cavalry could really come into its own. It largely depends on what sort of response the elves can lay on. Galathrun riders might be okay against one of these two units of cavalry, but against both, especially when one of them is sword cavalry, they're going to struggle. So they will need help, and the elves need to commit a good amount of strength to stop Umbar from simply claiming too much territory in the middle. So whether or not they can get those supporting units into place. That first sacrificial line of Orc Fodder was completely destroyed by Harad very, very quickly. That's not that surprising. Whatever happened to the Mumaks? Oh, there they are. Trying to find just the right place to drive themselves home. Oh, like high. Right in the centre here, I mean a very high-end unit of course. Malcolm's Abominations, a little bit surprised they're not acting in response more so to the Umbar cavalry across the way. I mean, they will certainly be enough to defeat all of the Harad cavalry in melee, camels or no. But it does give Umbar maybe a little bit more of an opportunity. Cavalry, of course, with the charges, have proven to be so effective so far. It's actually the javelins on the Beasts of Gorgoroth which are being used more than anything at the moment, from their vantage point as well. Able to get a decent angle. Good damage being done, but I think Trollmen will demolish Uruk infantry, and that is a little bit of a problem. From an Umbar perspective, it's more the fact that they're able to flank around the lower numbers of the elves with Harad. It's the fact that too much of the Mordor forces, really low-end stuff, which they should be able to sweep aside, backed up by pikes on both counts as well, so the blue team will need to get creative with how they deal with this. I mean, certainly the damage on these elven units is very significant, and Sindar Blade Masters on the way forwards as well. Javelins on the flank. This is a bit of a mosh pit, this. Sindar or Karen Amroth Staff Masters revealing themselves on the flank. Good reinforcements to bring into this situation, to be honest. They need to try and silence those blackguards if they're able. Blathran Nobles firing away. If Umbar can make this flank stick, although that's a bad sign, the fact that their general fell away, that could be enough to convince a lot of these Corsairs to rout. Shade of Numenor on the way forward, having not done a huge amount of damage from afar. Forward comes the Mumakil now. I mean, certainly the York Javelins are not going to enjoy getting bowled into by the Mumakil, and indeed they rout almost immediately. They may very well come back, but that soft, gooey centre of the Mordor army has fared relatively poorly against Harad, but it's in other areas where Mordor can maybe come back against Harad, especially with the Melkor's Abominations in behind enemy lines. The Trolls now able to get a partial flank onto the Harad infantry. It may very well make this a little bit more of an even exchange. We'll see. I mean, a lot of it may very well come down to how well these supporting units were able to be used, supporting this frontline engagement, which formed very quickly and already is starting to fracture in multiple directions, both sides having good moments and bad moments. Bathroom Warriors, defeat seems certain for them, apparently. Victory seems certain.
Only half our force remains.
Again, victory and defeat varying across the line. The flank, the York Javelins still fleeing. The Umbar cavalry able to get in behind. I mean, some really good charges into the back of these elves might be a real problem. The Mumakil perished pretty quickly. Again, the presence of all the javelins. There's only 3 of them after all, if you can focus them down. That is the upshot. In regular engagements like this, especially when they go marching through pikes like that, the Beasts of Gorgoroth are going to fall away very, very quickly. Half speed again, I think. But yeah, I think the elves have managed to contain Umbar a little bit. There hasn't been any sort of grand sweeping flanking force. They've managed to hold on reasonably well, which is a bad sign for the red team overall. Will Harad have better luck against Mordor? I mean, certainly with stuff like the Champions of Neferat. The Nazgul, though, something that I missed actually in the competition phase. They were hidden well, and that's a good sign, because it means they were right in the heart of the army. Again, Mordor had little spots in their army which were incredibly tough to deal with. The Temple units, the Nazgul, and then Olag High. The vast majority of it may have been fairly easy for a Harad force to deal with, especially with the damage they're capable of doing, but I don't know, they're not going to have, I think, enough gas left in the tank to be able to deal with the Mordor elites. So it was a well thought out composition. Trollman here on the flank, a decent job against these units, but Temple Guard have the finesse, certainly the damage to deal with a unit as low on defensive prowess as the Trollmen are. Lothlorien cavalry moving in. Warlords of Umbar getting mobbed, and I think more and more, as much as it was a little bit fractious from both sides earlier when this engagement began, we're starting to see a clear favourite emerge. Umbar pikes pointing in multiple directions now. Kindred. There's their blackguards as well. Carrying on with staff masters. Being engaged by all of these guys. The blackguards initially doing a pretty good job putting some pressure on the flank, but not able to get into the heart of the matter quickly enough to help turn things around, and the elven quality as well. Less faithful fleeing. It's always a bad sign when you see your high tier cavalry flee. So far only the Umbar general has fallen, but I think the Harad one will not be far behind. Some Harad forces heading over here, but far too late to reverse any sort of ill fate that Umbar seem to be befalling. Meanwhile, Harad the champions, probably the most obvious place for the general to be, although that's not always the case. Although there he is, a little bit further behind the engagement, so it should be okay for now. Trying to form up a little bit of a Death Star here in the middle of the army, consolidating their trollman. Malcolm's abominations. I mean, the cavalry has certainly played its part here, but I think Umbar needed their heavy cavalry to be really impactful in the late game, and unfortunately it got blunted pretty quickly. I don't think the difference either was truly made by the little bits of damage that the projectiles did from the archers. You know, it may have, the damage certainly helped, and the fact that the red team were caught off balance I think certainly helped. So they were certainly worthwhile to bring from that perspective. I think the compositions from the blue team were really very, very good. And the theme of this tournament now, I mean, in 2v2 like this, interplay between the two armies is always going to be key. Celeborn still strong. Not a huge amount of the elves left, but then they're always going to be a relatively small army, in the open field like this can be an intimidating place for them to be, but certainly their high quality units have really shown what they can do here. Beasts of Gorgoroth. Conversely, of course, the red team's high quality units, Champions of Nafra and Trollman did okay. Muakil though, the pikes weren't really able to establish themselves either. Did some damage to the Beasts of Gorgoroth on the way through, but by that point the blue team already had the clear advantage. In come the Champions of Nafrat as well. A limp charge that from the Lothlorien cavalry, but we'll forgive them that. They've certainly played their part throughout the whole tournament, in fact. They and units like them have certainly proven to be worth it, which was not true in the last version of the game. Way in the backfield, Uruk archers. What remains of the Trollmen. That is going to be that. A well-constructed victory indeed. And pretty much throughout, the red team, I think, were knocked off balance a little bit by how things went early doors. They were never really able to recover themselves. And the admissions of defeat are coming in. And considering the performances across the whole tournament, there goes the Harad General. Admissions of defeat may have been in, but the General was not able to escape that mosh pit. And he falls. And there we have it. Tommy and TS, the winners of the tournament. And like I was about to say, I think based on the performances throughout the tournament as a whole, it's probably the right outcome. They were definitely very impressive in pretty much every matchup they were in. And so it proved to be here as well in this deciding game of the grand final against TundrasFox and Wafflez. Commiserations for them, but still runners-up is not bad at all considering some of the performances we've seen in this tournament. A lot of high-quality stuff, and they were pipped right at the end here by Tommy and TS. So congratulations to them, first place winners overall. Let's see what did the damage for Tommy's army at the very least. Good amount of casualties inflicted. I mean, decently large armies from Umbar and especially Harad. Temple Guard, Uruk archers, decent amount of kills, shadow bows, Malcolm's abominations, good spread of kills here, not in their sort of front line, but you wouldn't really expect that, although 47 kills on Orc fodder is not dreadful, but a lot of that probably came towards the end when the avalanche began. But as far as this battle overall goes, I think the loss of the artillery duel early on really set the stage. I think the red team needed that. They needed that victory. They needed to be able to bombard the blue team. The blue team weren't really the kind of army that would have been too comfortable on the attack. And if the roles were reversed and the artillery duel had gone the other way, the artillery had then forced the blue team forward a little bit more. Maybe then the red team could have counterpunched them. I think that was the idea. But in the end, not able to make that work. And to be able to win an artillery duel, when you've got one ballista, your opponent has got a ballista and a trebuchet. It's a lot of value that you're already up on early doors. To then back that up with the fact that you have archer dominance pretty much means that you can then move forward a little bit more, keep that pressure up, just do bits and pieces of damage, force your opponents out of a comfort zone. And I don't even think launching that attack earlier would have necessarily helped them based on the composition they had. Maybe it would have a little bit, they would have had more numbers, but kamikazing into the enemy lines wouldn't have exactly helped them out either. They needed their cavalry in behind at that point, and even then the blue team had the answers to that with what they had in reserve. So it is what it is. It was a difficult one for the red team. Artillery is always one of those games of chance. I do think the red team maybe should have focused down the one artillery piece that the blue team had ultimately. I think that was the key moment where things went a little bit awry for them. If they had won that after all, it could have made a bit of a difference, but we will never know now. And like I said, I think the blue team thoroughly deserving victors both in this battle and in the tournament as a whole. And yeah, like I said, I think this is the sort of thing which I'd like to do again at some point, maybe in a little bit more of a structured format. Again, this would certainly be the sort of thing which would happen after the release of the new version of the game. And we'll take it from there. I think that's certainly the sort of thing which we'll look a little bit further afield for. But yeah, like I said, this one I wanted to release on a weekend day. This tournament has been going on after all for I think about 2 months at this point. It's the first time I've really done something like this, or at least done something like this from start to finish. And even then, like I said at the start of the battle, there's definitely room for improvement in terms of how it was structured from my end. I think the tournament itself was fine. It's, like I said, difficult to cover absolutely everything, especially early on when you've got, I think it was like 12 teams or something like that, and all of them are playing round robin 4 games. Like, it would have been impossible to do absolutely everything. But I am glad that I was at least able to do everything in the knockouts, and we got a good vertical slice of the group games as well. So yeah, like I said, we'll see what next time brings for this format of content. Some people may have noticed there's been a bit of a lack of sieges on the channel lately, and that's been twofold. One is the fact that it's been extremely busy at work, so recording time is at a severe premium at the moment. But also the fact that a lot of sieges, a lot of the people on the Discord who are part of the test build, they're trying to run set piece battles at the moment and trying to get it just so. So that does mean that there's ultimately less replays coming in at the moment, but hopefully this is the calm before the storm in that regard, because as we do get closer to release, of course on release there's going to be a little bit more going on, you would hope. I hope it hasn't been left too long for that to be the case and things to pick up again, but that's the sort of thing that we'll have to wait and see on. Again, I am still meaning to do a bit of a channel update in terms of, I was hoping really to be able to invest a little bit more time in the channel after the last one, considering my change of role, but that hasn't really happened. I'm still just as busy, just in a different way. So yeah, we'll see. As soon as I have a clear plan on what I'm going to be doing, which does kind of coincide with when the Reforged update comes out, I will be able to do said channel update. But yeah, we'll see. We will see. That's something that's going to be coming out possibly next Wednesday as well. Following on, of course, though, we'll be back to business as usual. But yeah, enough of my rambling at the end of this. Big congratulations to Tommy and TS for coming in first place. Commiserations to Tundras and Wafflez for coming in runners-up. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed the tournament overall, and I hope you'll enjoy and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.